The gunshot echoed across Willow Creek like thunder, freezing Isaac James in his tracks as dust swirled around his boots. The year was 1875, and the West was still wild enough that a man couldn't tell if that shot meant celebration or mourning. His heart raced as he urged his mare forward, the setting sun casting long shadows across the prairie, painting everything in hues of amber and gold. He'd been riding for 3 days straight from Denver, chasing whispers and rumors that had led him back to this town, back to her. Isaac pulled his hat lower, shielding his eyes from the dying sunlight. 10 years had passed since he'd left Willow Creek with nothing but shame and broken promises. 10 years since he'd seen Emma Reynolds, the woman whose heart he'd shattered when ambition called him away. The town looked different now, larger, more established, but the ache in his chest felt exactly the same. As his horse trotted down the main street, Isaac took in the changes. The general store had expanded, the saloon had a fresh coat of paint, and there were more houses scattered along the outskirts. The town had grown from the dusty collection of buildings he remembered into something resembling civilization. Progress had marched through Willow Creek while he'd been chasing fool's gold and empty dreams. "Isaac James, as I live and breathe," called a familiar voice. Isaac turned to see Thomas Miller standing outside his barbershop, razor in hand and gray streaking his once dark beard. "Tom," Isaac said, dismounting and extending his hand. "Been a long time." 10 years, give or take," Thomas replied, clasping Isaac's hand firmly. "You've grown up some, got that city look about you now." Isaac smiled ruefully. "Denver'll do that to a man." "What brings you back to our little corner of nowhere?" Thomas asked, his eyes searching Isaac's face. Isaac hesitated. "Just passing through, thought I'd see how things have changed." Thomas's expression told Isaac he wasn't fooled. "Well, you picked a good time to pass through. Town's having its spring barn dance tonight, everyone'll be there." He paused meaningfully. "Everyone." Isaac's throat tightened. "Emma's still around then?" Thomas wiped his hands on his apron. "She is, runs the schoolhouse now, took over from Mrs. Holloway about 5 years back." "She never left," Isaac said quietly, more to himself than to Thomas. "No," Thomas replied, his tone carrying a gentle reprimand. "Some folks plant roots instead of chasing horizons." Isaac nodded, accepting the judgment. "She married," Thomas gave him a long look. "That's her business to share, I reckon. Dance starts at sundown at the Wilson barn. Cleaned up, you might not cause too much of a stir." Isaac thanked him and led his horse toward the livery stable. He needed a bath, a shave, and courage he wasn't sure he possessed. The years had taught him many things, but nothing had prepared him for the prospect of facing Emma again. At the livery, Isaac handed the reins to a young, stable boy who couldn't have been more than 12. "Take good care of her," Isaac said, slipping the boy an extra coin. "She's carried me a long way." "Yes, sir," the boy replied, eyes widening at the coin. "You staying long? Don't know yet," Isaac answered honestly. "Depends on how the wind blows." After securing a room at the boarding house, now a proper hotel with a fancy painted sign, Isaac found himself standing in front of a steaming bath, staring at his reflection in a cloudy mirror. His face was leaner than it had been at 20, weathered by sun and wind. A thin scar traced his jawline, a souvenir from a bar fight in Silverton. His eyes, though, were the same deep blue, and his mother had always said, too honest for his own good. As he sank into the hot water, memories flooded back. Emma's laugh, like sunshine breaking through clouds. The way she'd twist a strand of honey-brown hair around her finger when she was thinking. The hurt in her eyes when he'd told her he was leaving, that he couldn't stay in Willow Creek when opportunity was calling from the mining towns. "I'll come back for you," he'd promised. "No," she'd said, with a wisdom beyond her 18 years. "You won't." And she'd been right. He'd written letters at first, full of excitement about his adventures and promises to return when he'd made his fortune. But as the months stretched into years, and one mining claim led to another, the letters had grown shorter, less frequent, until finally they stopped altogether. Now here he was, 10 years later, with nothing to show for it but calloused hands and a pocket watch that kept poor time. Isaac dressed in his best shirt, clean at least, though worn at the cuffs, and the trousers he kept for special occasions. His boots he polished until they gleamed, and he trimmed his beard to respectability. Looking in the mirror, he saw a man caught between the boy who'd left and the man he'd hoped to become. The sun was dipping low when Isaac stepped out onto the street. The sound of fiddles tuning up drifted from the direction of the Wilson property at the edge of town. Lanterns hung from trees marked the path, swaying gently in the evening breeze. Isaac followed the music and light, his heart pounding harder with each step. Other townsfolk walked the same path, nodding politely but eyeing him with curiosity. He recognized some faces older now, changed by time as his own had been, but many were strangers. The Wilson barn stood transformed. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over hay bales arranged as seating. A platform had been set up for the musicians, who were now playing a lively reel. Couples spun across the floor, laughing and stomping to the rhythm. Tables laden with food and drink lined one wall, and children darted between the adults, playing their own games of chase. Isaac stood in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. Then he saw her. Emma Reynolds stood across the room, talking to an older woman Isaac recognized as the blacksmith's wife. Her hair was pinned up, a few honey-brown tendrils escaping to frame her face. She wore a blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes, and she was smiling that same smile that had haunted his dreams for a decade. She was more beautiful than he remembered, no longer a girl but a woman with confidence in her bearing. She laughed at something the blacksmith's wife said, and the sound carried across the room, cutting through the music and conversation to reach Isaac like a physical touch. And then, as if feeling his gaze, Emma looked up. Her smile froze, then slowly faded as her eyes met his across the crowded barn. Time seemed to stop as they stared at each other, the noise and movement around them fading to nothing. Isaac couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but look at her and feel every mistake he'd ever made crashing down on him at once. Emma excused herself from the blacksmith's wife and made her way toward the refreshment table, her back straight, her steps measured. She did not look in Isaac's direction again. It took all of Isaac's courage to cross that floor. He moved slowly, nodding to those who recognized him but never taking his eyes off Emma. When he reached her, she was pouring herself a cup of punch, her hands steady though he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Emma," he said softly. She turned, her expression composed but her eyes guarded. "Isaac, I heard you were back. News travels fast. Some things about small towns never change." She took a sip of punch. "You look well." "So do you," he replied, drinking in the sight of her, "better than well." A flicker of something annoyance perhaps crossed her face. "What brings you back to Willow Creek? Last I heard, you were making your fortune in the mining towns." The bitterness in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. "Turns out fortune is harder to find than the stories make it sound," Isaac admitted. "I've been in Denver these past few years, working as a surveyor for the railroad." "Sounds steady," she said, her tone neutral now. "It is," he agreed. "Steadier than I've been anyway." The music changed to a slower waltz. Couples moved closer together, swaying to the gentle rhythm. Isaac gathered his courage. "Would you dance with me, Emma?" he asked, his voice low. For old time's sake, she hesitated, looking past him to the dancers, then back to his face. "I don't think that would be wise. Please," he said. "Just one dance. Then if you want me to leave you alone, I will." Emma studied him for a long moment, then set down her punch cup with deliberate care. "One dance," she agreed, "for closure if nothing else." Isaac offered his hand, and after a brief hesitation she placed hers in it. Her skin was warm, her touch sending a jolt through him that he fought to conceal. He led her to the dance floor, acutely aware of the eyes following them, the whispers starting in their wake. As they began to dance, Isaac was transported back to their first dance at the Founders' Day celebration when Emma had been 16 and he 18. She'd worn a white dress then and wildflowers in her hair. They'd been friends since childhood, but something had changed that night. He'd realized, as they danced under the stars, that his feelings for her ran deeper than friendship. Now, a decade later, they moved together with the awkward formality of strangers, though their bodies remembered the rhythm they'd once shared. "You still dance well," Emma said, breaking the silence between them. "Had a good teacher," Isaac replied with a small smile. "Remember how you made me practice behind your father's barn so I wouldn't embarrass myself at the Founders' Day dance?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You were hopeless, 2 left feet and no sense of rhythm." "I got better." "You did," she conceded. They fell silent again, moving to the music. Isaac was achingly aware of her hand in his, the proper distance between them that felt like a chasm. "I should have come back sooner," he said finally. "I should have kept my promise." Emma's steps faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Yes," she said, "you should have." "I wrote you letters for a while," she cut in. "And then you stopped. 3 years of silence, Isaac. I waited, looking for a letter, a telegram, any word at all. And then I stopped waiting." The music was drawing to a close. Soon their one dance would be over, and Isaac knew with terrible certainty that if he let her walk away now, he would lose her forever. As the final notes faded, he held onto her hand. "Emma, please," he whispered. "One more chance." "That's all I'm asking." Emma's eyes widened, surprise and something else, anger perhaps, or pain flashing across her face. She pulled her hand from his grasp. "A chance for what, Isaac? To leave again when something more exciting comes along, to make promises you don't intend to keep." Her voice was low but intense. "You had your chance, you chose to leave." "I was young and stupid," Isaac said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I thought I needed to make my fortune to be worthy of you. I thought I'd find gold or silver and come back a rich man, able to give you everything you deserved." "I never asked for riches," Emma replied, her composure cracking slightly. "I only wanted you, your presence, your constancy." Around them, people were watching with undisguised interest. The musicians were preparing for the next song. Their private moment was becoming a public spectacle. "Could we talk somewhere else?" Isaac asked. "Please, Emma, just give me a chance to explain." She hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Outside, 5 minutes." Isaac followed her through the crowd, aware of the curious looks and whispered comments. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy warmth of the barn. Emma led him to a quiet spot beneath an old oak tree where the sounds of the dance were muted and the lantern light barely reached them. She turned to face him, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "Say what you came to say, Isaac." Under the pale moonlight, with shadows playing across her face, she looked both familiar and strange, the girl he'd loved and the woman he didn't yet know. "I made a mistake," he said simply. "The biggest mistake of my life was leaving you. I thought I was doing the right thing, setting out to make my fortune before asking you to marry me. Your father never approved of me." "Don't blame my father," Emma interrupted. "He didn't force you to leave." "No," Isaac acknowledged. "That was my choice, my mistake. I thought I needed to prove myself worthy of you." "And did you find your fortune?" Isaac laughed ruefully. "No, I found hardship and disappointment. I found that gold fever is a disease that eats away at a man's soul. I saw good men turn into shells of themselves, obsessed with the next strike, the next claim." "So you failed and now you're back," Emma said, her voice flat. "That's not—" Isaac stopped, frustrated. "I didn't fail, Emma. I learned, I grew up, I realized what matters." 10 years is a long time to learn a lesson," she said quietly. "Too long," he agreed. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I don't expect anything, really. I needed to see you, to tell you I'm sorry, and to ask if there's any chance at all that we could start again." Emma was silent for a long moment. In the distance, the music had started up again, a cheerful tune at odds with the tension between them. "I'm not the same girl you left behind, Isaac," she finally said. "That girl who would have waited forever, who believed in fairy tales and happy endings, she's gone." "I don't want that girl," Isaac said earnestly. "I want the woman you've become, strong, independent. I want to know who you are now, Emma." She looked away toward the lights of the barn. It's not that simple. You can't just walk back into my life and expect. I don't expect anything, he interrupted. I'm just asking for a chance to talk, to get to know each other again. Emma shook her head slowly. I don't know if I can do that, Isaac. I don't know if I can risk it. Risk what, my heart, she said simply. I put it back together after you left. It took time, but I did it. I built a life here, a good life. Isaac's own heart sank. Is there someone else? Emma hesitated. No, she admitted, there's no one else. A flicker of hope ignited in Isaac's chest. Then what do you have to lose by talking to me? Just talking. Everything, she whispered, but the conviction in her voice was wavering. From the barn came the sound of laughter and stomping feet, life and joy continuing without them. I'm staying at the hotel, Isaac said. I'll be in town for a while, working. Actually, the railroad sent me to survey for a potential spur line. Emma's eyebrows rose. A railroad? Here, Isaac nodded. Willow Creek's growing. The cattle business is booming. A rail connection would change everything. Not everyone would welcome that change, Emma said, but he could see her mind working, the teacher in her considering the implications. Progress is coming one way or another, Isaac said. I'd rather help shape it than fight it. Emma studied him in the moonlight. You really have changed, haven't you? In all the ways that matter, he replied. I'm not asking for your forgiveness tonight, Emma. Just think about it, about giving us another chance. Before she could answer, a voice called from the direction of the barn. Emma, are you out here? Emma straightened, composing herself. That's Olivia Wilson. I promised to help with the refreshments. Go, Isaac said, but promise you'll think about what I said. Emma hesitated, then nodded once. I'll think about it. That's all I can promise. She turned to go, then paused and looked back at him. The schoolhouse has a broken window that needs fixing. If someone were to stop by tomorrow afternoon around 4 when the children have gone home. Well, I wouldn't turn away the help. Before Isaac could respond, she was walking quickly back to the barn, her blue dress swallowed by the darkness. Isaac leaned against the oak tree, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. It wasn't much a chance to fix a window, a few minutes of conversation, but it was something. It was a beginning. The next day dawned clear and bright, the kind of spring morning that made the harshness of winter seem like a distant memory. Isaac woke early, too restless to sleep. He spent the morning walking through Willow Creek, reacquainting himself with the town of his youth while noting the changes for his survey report. The general store was now run by Howard Miller, Thomas's son, who had been just a boy when Isaac left. The saloon had expanded to include rooms for travelers, though it still couldn't compete with the new hotel. A proper doctor's office had replaced the makeshift clinic in the back of the apothecary, and everywhere there were signs of Emma's influence. Children greeted him politely, tipping their hats or curtsying as they passed. The town bulletin board displayed notices about reading circles and mathematics competitions. Even the roughest cowboys seemed to mind their language as they passed the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse itself stood at the edge of town, a white clapboard building with a small bell tower. Isaac paused across the street, watching as children played in the yard during their midday break. Emma moved among them, her hair now in a practical bun, wearing a simpler dress than she had at the dance. She seemed to have eyes in the back of her head, breaking up a squabble between two boys without even turning around, all while helping a little girl with her skipping rope. Isaac didn't approach. It wasn't time yet. Instead, he continued his survey work, measuring distances and making notes about the terrain. The proposed spur line would bring significant changes to Willow Creek prosperity for some, disruption for others. It wasn't his job to decide whether those changes were good or bad, only to report on the feasibility of the route. At 3:30, Isaac returned to the hotel to clean up. He changed his shirt, polished his boots again, and spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to tame his hair. Then, gathering his tools purchased that morning from the general store, he set out for the schoolhouse. He arrived just as the last children were leaving, their high voices carrying on the afternoon breeze as they scattered toward home. Emma stood on the schoolhouse steps, bidding them goodbye, reminding one about a forgotten book and another about homework. When she saw Isaac approaching, she paused, her expression unreadable. He removed his hat as he neared, suddenly feeling like a schoolboy himself. "Miss Reynolds," he said formally, aware of the lingering children. "I heard you might have some repair work needs doing." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Mr. James, yes, I do believe there's a window that needs attention, if you'd care to follow me." She led him into the schoolhouse, a single room with rows of desks facing a larger desk and blackboard. The broken window was at the back, a crack running through one pane and a piece missing from the corner. "Billy Watson's baseball," Emma explained, setting her books on her desk. "He was very apologetic. Boys will be boys," Isaac said, setting down his tools and examining the damage. "I'll need to replace the whole pane, shouldn't take long." He set to work, carefully removing the broken glass while Emma tidied the classroom, straightening desks and erasing the blackboard. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the tension from the previous night easing somewhat in the simple practicality of their tasks. "You're good with them," Isaac said finally. "The children?" Emma looked up from the papers she was organizing. "They're good children, most of them, they just need guidance and consistency." "Like all of us," Isaac said softly. Emma didn't respond to that. Instead, she asked, "How long will you be in Willow Creek?" "At least a month," Isaac replied, measuring the window opening. "Maybe longer, depending on what the company decides about the spur line." And then Isaac paused, glancing over at her. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether there's a reason to stay," he said simply. Emma looked away, busying herself with her papers again. "The town is growing. There might be opportunities here you haven't considered." "I'm not looking for opportunities, Emma," Isaac said quietly. "I'm looking for home." The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Emma's hands stilled on her papers, but she didn't look up. "You had a home here once," she finally said. "You chose to leave it." "I did," Isaac acknowledged, "and not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted it." Emma finally met his eyes. "Regret isn't enough, Isaac." "I know," he said. "Actions matter more than words. That's why I'm here fixing your window. It's a start." A small smile touched her lips. "A very small start. Big journeys begin with small steps," Isaac replied, returning to his work. They fell silent again as Isaac fitted the new pane into place. When he was finished, he cleaned up the broken glass and wiped down the windowsill. "There," he said, stepping back to admire his work. "Good as new." "Thank you," Emma said, coming to stand beside him. "It's good work." "I've picked up a few skills over the years," Isaac said. "Not all my time away was wasted." Emma studied him, her head tilted slightly. "Tell me about it," she said suddenly. "Your time away, I want to know what happened to you, Isaac, where you went, what you saw." Isaac was surprised by the request, but he nodded. "I'd like that, but not here." "Where, then?" "Have dinner with me," he suggested. "Not at the hotel, too many curious eyes. Let me cook for you." Emma's eyebrows rose. "You cook now?" "Another skill I've picked up," Isaac said with a smile. "A man on the road either learns to cook or goes hungry." Emma hesitated. "I don't know if that's appropriate." "We could eat on the schoolhouse porch," Isaac suggested, "in full view of anyone who happens to pass by, very respectable." Emma considered this, then nodded slowly. "All right." "Tomorrow evening." "Tomorrow evening," Isaac agreed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation. Isaac finished his survey work early, then spent the afternoon preparing. He visited the general store for supplies, the butcher for a cut of beef, and Mrs. Wilson's farm for fresh vegetables. By late afternoon, he had everything he needed to prepare a proper meal. He arrived at the schoolhouse just as Emma was dismissing the children for the day. They greeted him with curious looks and whispers, but Emma's stern glance quickly sent them on their way. "I hope you're hungry," Isaac said, holding up his basket of provisions. "Starving," Emma admitted. "Though I'm still not convinced you can cook." "Prepare to be amazed." Isaac replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. It had been a while since he'd cooked for anyone but himself. Emma allowed him to use the small stove in the corner of the schoolhouse, kept there for the winter months when the children needed to warm themselves. Isaac set to work, slicing potatoes and carrots while the meat seared in a cast-iron pan. "Where did you learn to cook?" Emma asked, watching him from her desk where she was grading papers. "All over," Isaac replied. "A chuck wagon cook in Wyoming taught me how to make a decent stew. A Chinese man in a mining camp showed me the secret to perfect rice. And a widow lady in Colorado Springs taught me how to bake bread in exchange for chopping her firewood." "You've led an interesting life," Emma said, her tone neutral. "Interesting, yes. Fulfilling, no," Isaac replied honestly. "I've seen a lot of places, Emma, but none of them felt like home." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you write?" she finally asked. "After the first few years, the letters just stopped." Isaac's hands stilled on the vegetables. He'd been expecting this question, dreading it, but knowing it needed to be answered. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "Each letter I wrote was full of promises about coming back with a fortune, and each month that passed made those promises seem more hollow. I told myself I'd write when I had good news to share, when I'd finally struck it rich. But that day never came." "So pride kept you away," Emma said, her voice carrying a hint of the old hurt. "Pride and shame," Isaac agreed. "A powerful combination." "By the time I realized what really mattered, years had passed. I convinced myself you must have moved on, married, maybe had children. I told myself it would be selfish to disrupt your life." "You didn't even try to find out," Isaac shook his head. "Another mistake, one of many." He resumed his chopping, the rhythmic sound filling the silence between them. "What about you? Why did you stay in Willow Creek? You always talked about seeing the world," Emma sighed, setting down her pen. "Life doesn't always go as planned. My father fell ill the year after you left. He needed care, and with my mother gone, that fell to me." "I'm sorry," Isaac said softly. "I didn't know." "How could you? You weren't here," Emma replied, but without rancor. "He passed 3 years ago. By then, I'd taken over the school and I found I loved teaching. The children needed me. The town needed me." "You built a life," Isaac said. "A good one." "Yes," Emma agreed. "It's not the life I imagined at 18, but it's mine and I'm proud of it." Isaac nodded, understanding in a way he couldn't have 10 years ago. "You should be proud. Everyone in town respects you. The children adore you." "Not all of them," Emma said with a wry smile. "Billy Watson might have some reservations after I made him stay after school to help clean up the glass from the window." Isaac laughed. "A fair punishment." Their conversation flowed more easily after that, moving to safer topics: changes in the town, mutual acquaintances, the progress of Emma's students. By the time the meal was ready, the awkwardness between them had eased considerably. They ate on the schoolhouse porch as planned, sitting on the steps with plates balanced on their laps. The spring evening was mild, the air fragrant with wildflowers and the promise of summer. "This is actually quite good," Emma admitted after her first bite. "I'm impressed." "High praise from the skeptic," Isaac said with a smile. "I had reason to be skeptical. The last time you tried to cook, you nearly burned down your mother's kitchen." "I was 16. And apparently not a natural talent in the culinary arts," Emma teased. Isaac laughed, relieved to see this glimpse of the old Emma, the one who had teased him mercilessly, who had been his closest friend before she became something more. As they ate, Isaac noticed Emma watching a young couple strolling down the lane, hand in hand. There was something wistful in her expression. "You never married," he said softly, a statement rather than a question. Emma shook her head. "There were opportunities, offers, but no one who—" She trailed off. "No one who what?" Isaac prompted gently. Emma looked at him directly. "No one who made me feel the way you did," she said simply. "I couldn't settle for less." Isaac's heart constricted. "Emma, I don't," she interrupted. "Don't make promises, Isaac, not yet. We're just getting to know each other again." Isaac nodded, respecting her boundary, though every fiber of his being wanted to tell her how he felt. how he'd never stopped loving her even when he'd convinced himself it was too late. They finished their meal as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Isaac gathered the dishes, promising to return Emma's plates the next day. "Thank you for dinner," Emma said as they stood on the schoolhouse steps. "It was nice enough to do it again," Isaac asked hopefully. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but next time I'll cook." "It's a date," Isaac said, then quickly corrected himself. "I mean an arrangement, a friendly arrangement." Emma smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Good night, Isaac." "Good night, Emma," he replied, reluctantly turning to go. He was halfway down the path when her voice stopped him. "Isaac," he turned back. "Yes, I'm glad you came back," she said softly, then disappeared into the schoolhouse before he could respond. Isaac walked back to town with a lightness in his step that had been missing for years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Isaac continued his survey work during the day, mapping the potential route for the spur line and assessing the terrain. In the evenings, he and Emma would share a meal, sometimes at the schoolhouse, sometimes by the creek where they'd played as children, once even at the small house Emma had inherited from her father. They talked about everything and nothing: his travels, her teaching, the books they'd read, the changes they'd seen. Slowly, the years of separation began to feel less like an insurmountable barrier and more like a subject of conversation, a part of their shared history. Isaac made no declarations, no promises. He let his actions speak instead, showing up when he said he would, helping with repairs around the schoolhouse, listening when Emma spoke of her dreams for her students. And in return, Emma began to lower her guard, to show him glimpses of the woman she had become, stronger than the girl he'd left behind, but with the same compassionate heart. One evening, about 3 weeks after the barn dance, they walked along the creek as the sun was setting. The spring warmth had given way to early summer, and fireflies were beginning to appear among the reeds. "I used to catch them in jars when I was little," Emma said, watching the blinking lights. "My father would tell me to let them go because beautiful things shouldn't be caged." "Wise man, your father," Isaac replied. "I wish I'd known him better." "He was hard on you," Emma acknowledged, "but only because he saw how much I cared for you. He was trying to protect me." "He was right to worry," Isaac said ruefully. "I proved him right when I left." Emma was quiet for a moment, then said, "He changed his mind about you, before he died." Isaac looked at her in surprise. "He did," Emma nodded. "I received your last letter while he was ill. I read it to him. You wrote about the mining camp in Colorado, how the men there were destroying themselves chasing dreams that would never satisfy." Isaac remembered that letter. He'd written it after watching a man gamble away his claim, then drink himself into a stupor and nearly freeze to death outside the saloon. "My father said you'd grown wiser than he expected," Emma continued. "He said sometimes a man has to leave home to understand its value." Isaac stopped walking, turning to face her. "I never knew. How could you? I never replied to that letter," Emma said. "I was still too hurt, too angry." "I understand," Isaac said. "I didn't deserve a reply." They continued walking, the only sounds the gentle burbling of the creek and the distant call of a whippoorwill. "I should have written back," Emma said suddenly. "Pride kept me silent just as it kept you away. We're both to blame for the years we lost." Isaac shook his head. "No, Emma. The blame is mine. I made the choice to leave. I broke my promises. And I made the choice to harden my heart," Emma replied, "to assume the worst when I didn't hear from you." They had reached a bend in the creek where an old oak tree spread its branches over the water. It was here, 12 years ago, that Isaac had first kissed Emma, both of them nervous and awkward at 16 and 14. "Do you remember?" Emma asked softly, looking up at the tree. "How could I forget?" Isaac replied. "I was so nervous I nearly fell in the creek." Emma laughed. "And I had practiced kissing my pillow for weeks, hoping you would get up the courage to kiss me." "You never told me that. A lady has to have some secrets," Emma said with a smile. the moment stretched between them, filled with memory and possibility. Isaac wanted nothing more than to kiss her again, to bridge the years with a single touch, but he held back. The time wasn't right. There was still too much unresolved between them. Instead, he offered her his arm. "It's getting late, I should walk you home." Emma looked at him for a long moment, then took his arm. "Yes," she said. "Home." They walked back to town in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they reached Emma's house, a small but tidy cottage on the edge of town, Isaac stopped at the gate. "Thank you for the walk," he said. "And the conversation." Emma nodded, but she seemed distracted. "Isaac," she said suddenly, "how much longer will your survey work keep you in Willow Creek?" The question caught him off guard. "A week, maybe two. Why, and then what happens?" she pressed. "The railroad makes its decision, and you move on to the next town, the next project." Isaac studied her face in the dim light from her porch lantern. "That depends," he said carefully. "On what?" "On whether I have a reason to stay," he replied, echoing his words from weeks ago. Emma's expression was unreadable. "And do you have a reason?" Isaac's heart pounded. This was the moment he realized to be completely honest. "I think you know the answer to that, Emma." "I need to hear you say it," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaac took a deep breath. "You're my reason, Emma. You always have been. Even when I was too foolish to see it, too proud to admit it. If you want me to stay, I'll stay. If you need more time, I'll find a way to come back when my work is done. Whatever you need, whatever you want, that's what I'll do." Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I've waited 10 years to hear you say that," she said. "And now that you have, I'm terrified." "Of what?" Isaac asked gently. "Of believing you," Emma admitted. "Of trusting that this time will be different. That you won't leave again when things get difficult or when something more exciting comes along." "I can't promise that life won't get difficult," Isaac said, "but I can promise that I won't run from it from you ever again. I've learned the hard way that nothing out there," he gestured toward the horizon, "is worth losing what's right here." Emma wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I need time," she said, "to be sure, to trust my heart again." Isaac nodded, disappointed but understanding. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to." Emma reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. "Good night, Isaac." "Good night, Emma," he replied, watching as she went inside. As he walked back to the hotel, Isaac wasn't sure whether to feel hopeful or dejected. She hadn't rejected him outright, but neither had she welcomed his declaration. She needed time, and he would give it to her, even if waiting felt like agony. The next few days were difficult. Isaac threw himself into his work, finalizing his survey reports and mapping out the potential route for the spur line. He still saw Willow Creek was too small for their paths not to cross, but she seemed to be keeping her distance, polite but reserved when they encountered each other on the street or at the general store. Isaac respected her need for space, though it pained him. He had promised to give her time, and he would keep that promise, even if it meant watching her from afar, wondering if he'd opened his heart too late. 5 days after their walk by the creek, a telegram arrived for Isaac. The railroad company wanted him back in Denver immediately to discuss his findings. They were considering an alternate route, and his expertise was needed for the decision. Isaac stared at the telegram, his heart sinking. He had perhaps 2 days before he needed to leave, and Emma still hadn't given him any indication of her feelings. The timing couldn't have been worse. That afternoon, he went to the schoolhouse, but Emma was in the middle of a lesson. She saw him through the window, and something in her expression told him not to interrupt. He nodded in understanding and turned away, resolving to try again after school let out. But when he returned later, one of the students informed him that Miss Reynolds had gone to visit a sick child and wouldn't be back until the next day. Frustrated but determined, Isaac wrote a note and left it on her desk. "Emma, I've been called back to Denver on urgent business. I must leave the day after tomorrow. Please meet me at our oak tree by the creek tomorrow evening at sunset. There are things I need to say to you before I go. Yours always, Isaac the next day was the longest of Isaac's life. He packed his few belongings, settled his bill at the hotel, and made arrangements for his horse to be ready for an early departure the following morning. All the while, his mind was on Emma and the coming evening. As the sun began its descent, Isaac made his way to the creek. The oak tree stood as it had for decades, its branches casting long shadows across the water. He arrived early, too anxious to wait in his hotel room any longer. The minutes ticked by, and with each passing moment, Isaac's heart grew heavier. Perhaps she wasn't coming. Perhaps her silence over the past days had been her answer that she couldn't risk her heart again, that too much time had passed, too much damage had been done. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Still, Isaac waited, clinging to hope. And then, just as the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, he heard footsteps on the path. He turned to see Emma walking toward him, her expression guarded but determined. "You came," he said, relief washing over him. "Your note said it was important," Emma replied, stopping a few feet away from him. "It is," Isaac confirmed. "I've been called back to Denver." "I see," Emma said, her voice carefully neutral. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning," Isaac replied. "But Emma, I need you to know this isn't like before. I'm not leaving because I want to, and I'm coming back as soon as I can." "How long will you be gone?" she asked. "A week, perhaps 2, Isaac said. "No longer than that, I promise." Emma looked away toward the creek. "Promises are easily made, Isaac. And I intend to keep this one," he said firmly. "Emma, look at me, please." She turned back to him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I love you," Isaac said simply. "I never stopped loving you, not for a single day in all these years. I was a fool to leave, a greater fool not to come back sooner, but I'm here now, asking no, begging for another chance." Emma's composure cracked and tears welled in her eyes. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "So am I," Isaac admitted. "Afraid of losing you again, afraid of hurting you. But I'm more afraid of living the rest of my life without you, wondering what might have been if I'd had the courage to fight for us." He took a step toward her, closing the distance between them. "Come with me," he said suddenly, "to Denver, just for the 2 weeks, see the life I've built there. Meet my colleagues. Then if you want to come back to Willow Creek, we will together." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. "Just like that, leave my students my responsibilities? School term ends in 3 days, Isaac pointed out. "You told me yourself that you have a substitute arranged for the summer months. Miss Parker, wasn't it? The Reverend's daughter?" "Yes, but 2 weeks, Emma," Isaac pressed. "That's all I'm asking. 2 weeks to show you that I'm not the same man who left 10 years ago. 2 weeks to prove that my love for you is stronger than anything that might try to pull us apart." Emma hesitated, clearly torn. "Isaac, this is so sudden." "I know," he acknowledged, "and if you need more time to think about it, I understand. I'll go to Denver, handle my business, and come back as soon as I can. Whatever you decide, my feelings won't change." Emma studied his face in the fading light, searching for something sincerity perhaps, or the strength of his conviction. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her, because she took a deep breath and said, "Yes." "Yes," Isaac repeated, not daring to believe he'd heard correctly. "Yes, I'll go with you to Denver," Emma said, a smile breaking through her tears. "Not because I've decided to trust you completely, that will take time, but because I want to see the man you've become. And because—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "because I never stopped loving you either, Isaac. Despite everything, despite the years and the hurt, my heart has always been yours." Joy surged through Isaac, so intense it was almost painful. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms, and this time she came willingly, her body fitting against his as perfectly as it had a decade ago. "Emma," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "My Emma." And then he was kissing her, 10 years of longing and regret pouring into the contact. Her lips were soft beneath his, hesitant at first, but then responding with equal fervor. It was like coming home after a long, exhausting journey, familiar and new all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Emma looked up at him with wonder in her eyes. "I never thought I'd feel this again," she whispered. "Neither did I," Isaac admitted. "I thought I'd lost my chance forever." Emma touched his face gently, tracing the lines that hadn't been there a decade ago. "We've both changed," she said. "Grown, maybe that's what needed to happen. Maybe we weren't ready for each other before." "Maybe," Isaac agreed. "Or maybe we just had to learn the hard way what really matters." They stood together under the oak tree as darkness fell completely, making plans for their journey. Emma would need to speak to Miss Parker to make arrangements for her house and her cat, to pack suitable clothes for the city. There was much to do before they could leave. "I'll delay my departure by a day," Isaac decided. "That will give you time to prepare." "Are you sure your business can wait?" Emma asked. "They've waited this long for my report. They can wait one more day," Isaac said firmly. "You're more important." The certainty in his voice seemed to reassure her. "All right," she agreed. "We'll leave the day after tomorrow." They walked back to town hand in hand, their steps matched in rhythm, their hearts beginning to beat as one again. The past wasn't forgotten. It had shaped them both, taught them valuable lessons, but it no longer stood as a barrier between them. 2 days later, they boarded the train to Denver. Emma sat by the window, watching as Willow Creek faded into the distance. Isaac beside her, their fingers intertwined. "Second thoughts?" he asked gently, noting her pensive expression. Emma shook her head. "No," she said, "just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. A month ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future held. Now." She smiled at him. "Now everything has changed." "For the better, I hope," Isaac said. "Yes," Emma replied, squeezing his hand. "For the better." Denver was a revelation to Emma. Though she'd read about cities and seen illustrations, nothing had prepared her for the bustling reality: the tall buildings, the paved streets, the sheer number of people going about their business. Isaac watched her take it all in with wide eyes, grateful for the chance to see the familiar through her fresh perspective. He had arranged for her to stay in a respectable boarding house for ladies, while he returned to his own modest apartment nearby. Each day, he would call for her, and they would spend the hours together, Isaac attending to his business at the railroad company offices with Emma accompanying him, and then exploring the city in their free time. They visited museums and parks, ate in restaurants finer than anything Willow Creek could offer, and attended a theatrical performance that left Emma spellbound. Through it all, Isaac watched her, the way she absorbed new experiences with enthusiasm, the intelligent questions she asked, the grace with which she adapted to city life. And each evening, when he escorted her back to the boarding house, their parting grew more difficult. Their kisses lingered longer, their embraces tightened, and the words they didn't yet say hung in the air between them. A week into their visit, Isaac took Emma to dinner at the finest restaurant in Denver. He wore his best suit, and she wore a new dress they had purchased together, a deep green that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. "You look beautiful," Isaac said as they were seated at a table near the window, overlooking the lamplit street below. Emma blushed, still unused to such direct compliments. "Thank you, this is all so grand. I feel like I'm in a novel." "Is it too much?" Isaac asked, suddenly concerned. "We could go somewhere simpler." "No," Emma interrupted with a smile. "It's perfect. I'm just not used to such luxury." Their dinner was excellent, the conversation easy and comfortable. They had fallen back into their old rhythm, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at private jokes, communicating as much with glances as with words. As they lingered over dessert, Isaac gathered his courage for what he needed to say. "Emma," he began, his voice serious, "we need to talk about what happens next." Emma set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "Yes, I suppose we do." "My business here is nearly concluded," Isaac said. "Another day or two at most after that." He took a deep breath. "After that, we have choices to make." "What choices?" Emma asked, though he suspected she already knew. "I could return to Willow Creek with you," Isaac said. "Find work there, surveying, perhaps, or something else. Or—" He hesitated. "Or," Emma prompted, Or you could stay here in Denver with me, Isaac finished. The railroad is expanding. They need experienced surveyors. The pay is good, the work is steady. We could build a life here. Emma was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city lights. And what about my teaching? She asked. My students. Denver has schools too, Isaac pointed out gently. Good ones, always looking for qualified teachers. Your experience would be valued here. It would be a big change, Emma said, leaving Willow Creek everything I've known. I know, Isaac acknowledged. It's a lot to ask, and if it's too much, I understand. I meant what I said. I'll go wherever you want to be. Willow Creek, Denver, anywhere in between, as long as we're together. Emma looked back at him, her expression thoughtful. What about a third option? She suggested. A third option? Yes, Emma said, warming to her idea. What if we split our time? Live in Denver while you're working on railroad projects and in Willow Creek between assignments. I could teach during the school term and we could come to the city for the summers. Isaac considered this, surprised and impressed by her practical solution. That could work, he said slowly. It would mean a lot of travel, but we'd have the best of both worlds, Emma finished. My teaching, your surveying, the city and the country. Isaac reached across the table to take her hand. You continue to amaze me, Emma Reynolds. Just when I think I know you, you surprise me with your wisdom and practicality. Is that a yes? Emma asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. It's an absolute yes, Isaac confirmed. If that's what you want, that's what we'll do. Emma's smile was radiant. There's just one problem with this plan, she said. What's that? It assumes a great deal about our future together, Emma pointed out, and you haven't actually asked me a certain question yet. Isaac's heart skipped a beat. You're right, he said, squeezing her hand. I haven't. Making a decision, he stood up and then, to Emma's clear surprise, knelt beside her chair. Around them, other diners turned to watch, smiles appearing on faces as they realized what was happening. Emma Reynolds, Isaac said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. I have loved you since we were children, though I was too young and foolish to understand what that meant. I lost you once through my own blindness, and I have spent 10 years regretting that mistake. I don't want to spend another day wondering what might have been. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box purchased 3 days earlier when Emma had been distracted by a millinery display. I promised myself I wouldn't rush you, Isaac continued, that I would give you all the time you needed. But these past 2 weeks have shown me that the love between us is stronger than time or distance or past mistakes. So I'm asking you now with all my heart, Emma Reynolds, will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring not ostentatious but elegant, with a small diamond flanked by 2 emeralds that reminded him of her eyes. Emma's hands flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. For a heart-stopping moment, Isaac feared he'd moved too quickly, that she wasn't ready. But then she was nodding, tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, Isaac James, I will marry you. The restaurant erupted in applause as Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was brief but filled with promise, mindful of their audience but unable to contain their joy. When they broke apart, Emma looked down at the ring on her finger, then back up at Isaac with wonder in her eyes. When did you get this? She asked. 3 days ago, Isaac admitted. When you were trying on hats, I saw it in the jeweler's window and knew it was meant for you. You were that certain I would say yes, Emma teased, though her eyes were still bright with tears. I was that certain I had to ask, Isaac replied. Even if you'd said no, or asked for more time, I wanted you to know how serious I am about our future together. They returned to their seats amid congratulations from nearby tables. The restaurant manager sent over champagne on the house, and they toasted their engagement, both still slightly dazed by the swiftness with which their lives had changed. When? Emma asked as they sipped their champagne. When should we marry? As soon as possible, Isaac replied without hesitation. Unless you want a long engagement, Emma shook her head. No, we've wasted enough time already, but I'd like to be married in Willow Creek with our friends there to witness it. Of course, Isaac agreed. We could return next week, make the arrangements. How does a month sound? Too soon. Not soon enough, Emma said with a smile that made his heart race. They left the restaurant arm in arm, walking through the lamplit streets of Denver back toward Emma's boarding house. The night was clear, stars visible even through the city's glow, and a sense of rightness settled over them both. At the boarding house steps, their goodnight kiss was deeper, more urgent than before, filled with the promise of their future together. "I love you, Emma Reynolds," Isaac whispered against her lips, soon to be Emma James. "I love you, Isaac James," she replied, "my past and my future." The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Isaac concluded his business with the railroad, securing a position that would allow for the arrangement they had discussed, working on specific projects with time in between to return to Willow Creek. Emma sent telegrams to key friends in town, announcing their engagement and impending return. And then they were on the train again, this time heading back to the place where their story had begun. As Willow Creek came into view, Emma squeezed Isaac's hand. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "Everything has happened so quickly. What will people think?" "That we've finally come to our senses," Isaac replied with a smile. "Besides, after that barn dance, I doubt anyone will be surprised." Emma laughed. "You're probably right. News travels fast in small towns." The train pulled into the station, which was busier than usual. As they stepped onto the platform, Isaac realized why a small crowd had gathered, led by Thomas Miller and his wife, Howard from the general store, and several of Emma's students. "Welcome home," they called, surging forward to surround the couple. Thomas clapped Isaac on the shoulder. "About time you made an honest woman of her," he said gruffly. "How did you know?" Emma asked, bewildered. Mrs. Miller laughed. "Your telegram said you were engaged, dear. Did you think we wouldn't come to welcome you home?" The next hour was a blur of congratulations, questions about Denver, and discussions about wedding plans. Eventually, Isaac managed to extract them from the well-wishers, promising more details soon, and escorted Emma to her house. "That was overwhelming," Emma said as they reached her gate. "In a good way, I hope," Isaac replied. "Yes," Emma assured him. "It's nice to know we have their support, but I hadn't expected quite such an enthusiastic reception." "You're loved here," Isaac said simply. "They're happy for you, for us." Emma smiled up at him. "So am I." The following weeks passed in a flurry of preparations. They set the date for the end of July, giving them just enough time to arrange everything. The church was booked, invitations sent, and Emma began work on her wedding dress with the help of Mrs. Miller and several other ladies from town. Isaac, meanwhile, found temporary work helping the local ranchers with land surveying while he prepared their house, Emma's father's house, which would now become their home together, at least for part of the year. He repaired the roof, replaced the worn front steps, and added a small study where Emma could prepare her lessons and he could work on his maps and reports when they were in town. They spent their evenings together, planning their future, talking about everything and nothing, rediscovering each other and marveling at how right it felt to be together after so many years apart. On the evening before their wedding, they walked to their oak tree by the creek. The summer night was warm, fireflies dancing among the reeds, the air heavy with the scent of wildflowers. "It feels like a dream," Emma said as they sat on the bank, her head resting on Isaac's shoulder. "After all this time, all the heartache, here we are." "Not a dream," Isaac assured her, kissing the top of her head. "Very real and long overdue." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back?" Emma asked. "If you hadn't seen me at that barn dance," Isaac considered this. "I think I would have come back eventually," he said. "It might have taken longer, but I was already heading in this direction. Denver never felt like home, despite my work there. I was always searching for something, never quite finding it. And now," Emma tilted her face up to look at him. "Now I've found it," Isaac said simply. "Home isn't a place, Emma. It's where your heart belongs, and mine has always belonged with you." Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "When did you get so wise?" she teased. About the same time I realized what a fool I'd been to leave you, Isaac replied with a rueful smile. Nothing like a decade of regret to teach a man wisdom. Emma kissed him then, soft and sweet, a promise of the life they would build together. No more regrets, she whispered against his lips. Only forward from here. Only forward, Isaac agreed, together. The next day dawned clear and bright, as if the heavens themselves approved of their union. The church was filled with flowers, wildflowers from the creek, roses from Mrs. Wilson's garden, and even a few exotic blooms that Isaac had ordered from Denver as a surprise. Isaac stood at the altar, Thomas beside him as his best man, watching as the church filled with familiar faces. The entire town seemed to have turned out for the occasion, from the oldest resident to the youngest child. And then the music began and the doors opened, and Emma appeared on the arm of Howard Miller, who had agreed to give her away in her father's absence. Isaac's breath caught in his throat at the sight of her. She wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Her honey-brown hair was pinned up with sprigs of baby's breath, a few curls framing her face. But it was her expression that struck him most, the pure joy radiating from her as their eyes met across the church. As she walked toward him, Isaac felt all the years of separation, all the mistakes and regrets falling away. This was always where they were meant to be, finding their way back to each other despite the detours life had thrown in their path. When Howard placed Emma's hand in his, Isaac squeezed it gently, a silent communication of all he felt. She squeezed back, her eyes never leaving his as the reverend began the ceremony. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with deep conviction. Each word weighted with the understanding of what they had overcome to reach this moment. When Isaac slipped the ring onto Emma's finger, a simple gold band to accompany her engagement ring, his hand trembled slightly. And when he was finally told he could kiss his bride, he did so with a tenderness that brought tears to more than a few eyes in the congregation. "Mrs. James," he whispered as they broke apart, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "Mr. James," she replied with a radiant smile. At last! The celebration that followed was everything a small-town wedding should be: joyful, generous, and slightly chaotic. Tables were set up in the town square, laden with food prepared by every household. Music played, children danced around the newlyweds, and as the sun began to set, lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the festivities. As evening deepened, someone called for the couple's first dance. Isaac led Emma to the center of the square where a space had been cleared. The fiddler struck up a waltz, the same melody that had been playing at the barn dance when Isaac had first approached Emma after his return. "You remember?" Isaac asked as they began to move together, as perfectly in sync as if they had been dancing together every day for the past decade. "How could I forget?" Emma replied. "You looked so nervous when you asked me to dance." "I was terrified," Isaac admitted, "afraid you'd refuse, or worse, that you'd agree but only out of politeness." "I almost did refuse," Emma confessed. "My pride was still hurting, but something in your eyes." "What?" Isaac prompted when she trailed off. "Hope," Emma said simply. "I saw hope there, and it sparked something in me that I thought had died years ago." Isaac pulled her closer, propriety be damned. "Thank God for that spark," he murmured. Others joined them on the makeshift dance floor, but Isaac and Emma remained in their own world, swaying together as the stars appeared overhead. It was only when Thomas tapped Isaac on the shoulder, reminding them of the time, that they reluctantly ended their dance. Their bags were already loaded in the wagon that would take them to the train station the next morning. They would spend 2 weeks in San Francisco, a wedding gift from Isaac's colleagues at the railroad, before returning to Denver to begin their new life together. As they said their goodbyes and prepared to leave the celebration, Emma's students surrounded her, presenting her with a handmade quilt they had secretly worked on under Mrs. Miller's guidance. Each square contained a message or image, a memory of their teacher who had touched their lives. Emma was overcome, hugging each child in turn. "I'll be back before the school term begins," she promised. "And I expect you all to work hard for Miss Parker in the meantime." "Will Mr. James be teaching us too?" one of the younger boys asked, looking up at Isaac with curious eyes. Emma glanced at Isaac, a question in her gaze. They hadn't discussed this possibility. "I might help with mathematics and geography when I'm in town," Isaac said, surprising himself as much as Emma. "If Miss Reynolds, Mrs. James approves, of course." "I think that's an excellent idea," Emma said, her eyes shining with pleasure at this unexpected addition to their plans. They left the celebration amid cheers and well wishes, walking hand in hand to Emma's house, their house now, for their first night as husband and wife. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Emma traced patterns on Isaac's chest with her fingertips. "Are you happy?" she asked softly. Isaac captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he said. "Are you?" "Yes," Emma replied without hesitation. "I feel like my life is finally beginning, the life I was always meant to have." "It won't always be easy," Isaac said, wanting to be honest. "Splitting our time between here and Denver, adjusting to married life after so many years alone." "Nothing worthwhile is ever easy," Emma said with the wisdom that had always been part of her. "But we've already overcome the hardest part, finding our way back to each other. Everything else is just details." Isaac pulled her closer, marveling at the feel of her in his arms. "I love you, Emma James," he whispered into her hair. "Forever and always." "And I love you, Isaac James," she replied, her voice heavy with sleep. "Forever and always." As Emma drifted to sleep beside him, Isaac remained awake a while longer, watching the moonlight play across her face. 10 years ago, he had left Willow Creek convinced that his future lay elsewhere, that success and fulfillment waited just over the horizon. How wrong he had been. Everything he'd ever wanted, ever needed, had been here all along. At the barn dance, he had crossed the floor and whispered, "One more chance." And miracle of miracles, she had given it to him. Now they had a lifetime ahead of them, a lifetime to love, to learn, to build something beautiful together. Outside their window, a whippoorwill called into the night. Inside, in the circle of his arms, Emma slept peacefully. And Isaac James, once restless, always searching, finally found himself exactly where he belonged.